Hello, gentle listener. Welcome to Revolver's Fan First podcast, where we go deep with artists on their history as a fan. Today, we have a very special guest, Ville Valo, Finland's finest. Welcome.
How you doing?
I like that. That was a bit goth. That was a bit spooky, and
Yeah,
it feels in tune.
just the way we like it. Yeah, it was like somewhere in between Barry White and Nosferatu.
What have you ever sung a Barry White song in karaoke?
Oh no. The only song I ever sung in karaoke, which I've done several times, is "Sweet Child of Mine."
Do you nail it?
No, but once I think I won on a ferry. I won a carton of Marlboros for singing it. So I'm not sure if it was because I sung or because I got off the stage or whatever. But when you put one and one together, that.
Well,
so yeah, it was great. It fit that particular moment in time perfectly. It also the carton served as my pillow, so the pillow got smaller and smaller and smaller by the trip. But it was a festival trip, a weekend insanity in Denmark at a place called Roskilde.
Well, that's quite a vivid memory. I kind of like that he has like one of the highest voices in rock, and you have one of the lowest voices, and that somehow magically works.
But then again, Axl Rose supposedly is a natural baritone.
Yeah.
So he's like speaking most of the stuff. It's not super high. So I guess it's I don't know. Maybe he has a very muscular thighs.
It's an interesting world, and I would really like, you're expanding into new ground with your solo work. I kind of want to hear a Sweet Child of Mine cover. Like I kind of do. This has gone down a complete sideline path. And I'll bring it back to the show. So this is kind of all about your history as a fan. So when was the first time you felt emotion through someone else's guitar or their voice? Like where you felt like there was a channel kind of coming through. I don't know whether that's
that's interesting. Actually, I think I had a cousin. She was a few years older than me, and she was the one doing these mixtapes for me that had like Michael Jackson's Thriller on side A, and then White Snake or Rainbow, the early albums on side B, and so forth. So that's probably the first time I heard like hard rocking stuff, because my parents weren't listening to that heavy duty stuff. My dad loved like Emmylou Harris, and my mother was listening to maybe Stones was the hardest rocking band they ever dug in their youth. But I guess it happened through my cousin, and then just going to school. That was at that time. I was born in '76, so I went to school when like Wasp came out with their first album, and Twisted Sister came out with Stay Hungry, I guess it was. And then my first LP was Animalized by Kiss. That's the first one I bought. And then it was all downhill from there, getting into Iron Maiden and all that stuff. So, but to be honest with you, I can't remember the first sort of eureka moment, after hearing distorted guitar. I think it happened via Black Sabbath and the sort of Queens of Stone Age Kaya sort of stuff later on, that I really started to appreciate the fuzzy sort of, things being wrong in a perfect way sort of thing.
That's quite a beautiful way of putting it. Things being wrong in a perfect way.
Isn't it like that? And at the end of the day, I think what we're trying to do with art in general is trying to find the beauty spots and embellish them, not too perfect. And it doesn't make any sense to try to make things perfect. Then it just becomes really boring, I think. So it's trying to find the unique little sort of twisted little thingies, and not unlike a David Lynch movie or whatever. So seemingly A-okay and sort of nice and neat until Bob comes along or whatever. So yeah, that's how I see music and how I see art in general. And I think life and people too, because the sort of search for it's a search for the perfect imperfection, I would say. That's I think a nice putting it as well.
I guess it's also about like the dynamic between things. Like I think sometimes when we kind of think of perfection, it's about this abstraction and this separation, whereas the perfect imperfection is the collision of two things and the way they work together, like music or like art or people or any of them. It's almost like that third element kind of thing.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And that took me like 40 years to sort of understand, especially when it comes to chemistry between people. And the beauty of it being when you just let go. You're not trying to force yourself into a mold or the other person. I'm not necessarily talking about traditional girl boy relationship in that sense, but all sorts of friendships and meetings of similar minds and so forth. You know, so it's nice when you can just, and when it's more than yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you got me there.
Yeah.
Now start thinking, waxing a philosophic and waxing nostalgic at the same time. You know,
it's fun to get into. Look, I love nostalgia and philosophy, so you know, I'm always interested. But I'm always interested in how people really feel about stuff, because you know, art is such an interesting thing, because it's exposing something of yourself, but in the process, you're kind of, it exposes something of other people that maybe you're not getting to see.
Well, I think as an outsider, when you're looking in, or a voyeur, so to speak, I think it's easier to get in down that sort of rabbit hole. But as a doer, if you do your own art, or when you write, you just want to get lost in the moment and not realize what just happened, you know, a few moments or a few years after. That's the beauty of it, when you're really just lost in the process. And I think that's beautiful, and that shouldn't, in my case, I don't like to, you know, turn it into a mathematical equation. I like it to be as sort of whimsical, otherworldly, and naive. There's some sort of cool demonic blue-eyedness in it all. There has to be naivety, and there has to be the sort of the trust in what you're doing. You know, if you start second guessing everything, especially when it comes to strumming and humming, I think you lost it. You know, you can do that later on. You know, once the sort of like arty-farty process is over, then you can start to figure out, you know, whether it makes any sense or whether it's usable. But the actual moment of creation, or whatever you want to call it, you know, I think that's supposed to be something very sort of you know, feral, and some, you know, very very ungentlemanly. Let's put it that way.
Ungentlemanly is great. Yeah. Well, you know, it should be feral and ungentlemanly. It's the moment of conception, isn't it? Like, let's be real. So
yeah, it's gonna be wild.
Yeah, you've got to, like, so you wrote and performed and did everything on this record, on Neon Noir, correct? Your solo album?
Besides mixing it and then mastering it. So that was done by, the mixing was done by a fellow called Tim Palmer, who worked with him several times in the past, and whom I've known for about 20 years. And who also, I love the fact that the stuff he's been working on is so very varied. He's worked with Tears for Fears and Dave Bowie with Tin Machine and Robert Plant's 80s albums, but then again Sepultura and Ozzy and him. And I think that he knows instinctually and knows and appreciates the sort of the weird juxtaposition of different sorts of elements that, you know, both him stuff and my own can get pretty poppy and jangly at times, but then again it can have those Sabbathy moments as well, and they go hand in hand, at least in my world. But I think the biggest challenge was the concept of myself making an album after him, and actually I did the album song by song. So for me, each and every song was sort of an excuse, like a sonic excuse for me to exist. Since, you know, it's not only that you're as good as your last song, as they say in record company, you know, lingo, but it's more, I think, it's more existential than that for a writer. Because if you can't write something that pleases you, that you think changes everything, that is the center of your world at that moment, you think that you've tapped into the stream of whatever, ungodliness. If you don't, if you don't think that if you can't get that to happen, then you think that you've failed. And if you think you're a failure, then you can't get anything done. So it's a constant struggle trying to find new to listen to the old Black Sabbath songs from a vantage point of trying to steal the riffs in another way, a way you haven't done before, so to speak.
You do have some Iommi moments on that album. You do have like a little bit. Yeah, you do. You can hear it.
Hopefully. I'm a huge fan, and I think about regarding Black Sabbath. It's not that whole group doesn't represent just the musicality of it all, but it's the whole vibe of four fellas coming from an area in the world that wasn't filled with rock stars and pretension and that sort of thing. They came from a very hard, working class families from an industrial area in England and created something unusual and
Mm.
maybe even unlikely. There's something beautiful about. They're the torchbearers on various levels for what I'm trying to achieve, whatever it is.
Well, he's a great example of someone who has had an incredible solo career and remains a very beloved part of the band. And like they're larger than life characters. You're a larger than life character. You've transcended. It's true. Like that's just facts. There aren't
Well,
that many characters in the.
I'm larger than a very minuscule life.
Yeah, of course.
That's what. Yeah.
No, I mean it's a well. What are people from? You're from Finland. That's
Yeah.
a fairly alien thing. You're not coming from a place of rock stars or New York or LA. What's the Finnish perspective on it? If they're just four dudes from Birmingham, like what? What's the lens? What's the lens? Because you make dark and beautiful music. Is it a dark and beautiful place? Is this a ridiculous question? I don't know.
That's a bunch of questions in one. Well, I think if going back to Finnish like drama or literature or poetry or classical music, we've always appreciated, not unlike the Russians and not unlike Portuguese for whatever reason, we've appreciated sort of wistful, melancholy, nostalgic, sort of, beautiful sadness. So I think that's genetic, and that's something I can't avoid. But regarding the rock star thing, I think that we really didn't have that sort of a culture.
In terms of like you as a music fan, like do you remember being 13, 14? Like what were you wearing musically? Like what were you wearing to reflect your musical taste? What did you get up in the morning and listen to? What did you kind of live and breathe at that point when you were kind of a young teenager?
I'm thinking about 14, so it would have been 1990. So that was right before Nirvana's Nevermind. It was that sort of. I think I was listening. I was skateboarding quite a bit in the late '80s, and during that time I was actually listening to quite a bit of hip hop, not understanding the lyrics at all. But it was I loved it. I loved the. I still have some Eric B and Rakim, like Follow the Leader.
Paid in Full.
And yeah, that sort of stuff. I think Follow the Leader is the one afterwards, and it's '86 maybe, and I was just listening to my little brother. He's always been really into electronic music, and we're just laughing about. I actually have the original, like they call it Acid, the first single. They called it Acid. That's sort of like weird dancing track from '87 or '88. I bought it when it came out. Don't ask me why, but I think I was trying to find my way, and I think the biggest change happened to I think all of us around the Nirvana time, because that was when like 92, 93, because that was Nirvana, but then it was Ritual de la Habitual by Jane's Addiction. It was Angel Dust by Faith No More. It was Bad Brains came back together with Quickness. All these weird bands that combined elements that wasn't sort of cool to do before, because you had to be like in a hair metal band, or you're wearing a country rock band or a reggae band or whatever. But then all of a sudden all the rules were thrown out, kind of similar fashion, I guess, that in the late 70s and early 80s, that you didn't have to be a musician to play in a band. You just needed an attitude and a good look. So I think that that's when I really got into. I studied a bit. My first instrument was bass guitar, and I loved Steve Harris and I loved Gene Simmons, and that's the stuff I grew up listening to, more or less. Iron Maiden and that, and then. But then again, there was a lot of little changes as then in the mid '80s we had Master of Puppets, Rain in Blood, Anthrax came along, so it started to be like faster and heavy, and then all of a sudden there was this satanic thing happening as well, late '80s, early '90s. Then early 90s, we had Deicide, Carcass, Entombed, Godflesh. And on the other hand, Lemonheads, Dinosaur Jr., there's early Smashing Pumpkins. So I loved all that stuff, and all that was very informative, if that's the word. All that stuff built me, as a musician.
What did you take with you? What are the most important things you've stolen
from that era?
From yeah.
Or I think the one thing that people really can't take away, don't sacrifice your identity.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you have, who you are, in the good aspects and the bad aspects, and nobody's perfect, like they say in the end of Some Like It Hot. I think that's the great line, in which I should actually see again, because I should watch it again. I haven't seen it in probably 15 years, but nevertheless, but I think simple things like stick to your guns. It's easier said than done. In like when there's all of a sudden big producers or big record label people, when you get that chance, there's somebody like a head honcho of a international record label listens to your demo, and then you're like, of course you'll listen to what they say matters, but just sticking to your guns, believing what you do, because at the end of the day, all those record company people, they're just moving on from a project to project, but you're not a project. It's your life. It's you in your entirety. And if it isn't, change of profession.
Yeah. Well, how is it different writing for yourself than writing for the band? Like, what's the shift here?
Well, I always wrote for myself.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because I still start writing from. I wrote most of the hymn songs, and usually starts with the acoustic guitar and myself, and an emotional state which I can't put into words. I guess that it's similar when people need to do something different. You need to write something down, or you need to go and ride horses. Just like get yourself away. I think that when you gather all the information, it gets jumbled in your hard drive somewhere, and you need to get it out one way or the other. And everybody has their own ways. Some people have hobbies or physical exertion or whatever. But for me, it's a 24/7 sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which fits perfect. Because I'm a drama queen, and I'm always having a hard time. And I think that the cog in the wheel is myself. So to understand that is a big deal. So to understand, it's not the world, it's myself. So.
Well, there's a lot of drama in your music. It makes sense you're a dramatic individual. Like, it'd be weird if you weren't.
Once again, what is music without drama? It's not music.
It's not music.
So I think that emotions and I think enhanced. I like the old school drama when everything is a matter of life and death. Because to me, life it is like just it needs to be a bit like that, because if it's just Netflix and spaghetti, it doesn't have the right ring to it.
This is a slight segue, but it's a question I've asked before. Is what kind of music do you listen to at times of joy, rage, sorrow, and love? So when you're happy, what are you listening to?
I think I always listen to sad music. It's like once again, it's like tapping into this sort of stream of this age-old eternal melancholy that keeps me on the straight and narrow, and I think it's important for me. That's my God, so to speak. But it's quite interesting that when people are happy, or actually the other way around, when they're very sad, they usually don't listen to happy music. They want to sort of like coexist with something that's musically and lyrically and sound-wise as painful as the turmoil they're going through within, which is quite weird. It would be way more logical to, when you're feeling bad, listen to happy music, and when you're feeling happy, don't listen to music, do something more worthwhile. But so-called happy music makes me incredibly pissed off most of the times. I can't stand happy music.
You just actually, what was the first music you heard that you had a strong reaction to that wasn't love? What can you not stand?
If I don't only remember, I think that's the beauty of the human mind. You tend to forget.
The bad stuff you don't like.
it's probably the 97% of music I've heard, because
Really?
a lot of it's very a lot of music is like McDonald's. It does serve a purpose, but it's not something to really aspire to.
It's
So
not palatable.
yeah, yeah. So it's complicated. I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out why. Well, there's a lot of music like that. Anything by Coldplay, but
You
but that was
you never want to hear Coldplay again?
no. Now that I'm getting a bit older, I can appreciate what they've done. I can appreciate some of the musicality. Well, the Beatles are a good example. Like "She Loves Me," yeah, 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 whatever the song's called. I can't stand the Beatles. There's a few nice tracks here and there. It's funny because some people just adore them, and my parents, they was like the Stones. I felt that they have a bit more danger and they have a bit more melancholy, like "Give Me Shelter," and it was a bit more rough around the edges. There's a word I've forgotten, and I've forgotten to use it, for the past at least 10 years. And the word is romantic. And I've sort of like not realized that, yeah, I'm a romantic at heart. And that's actually what I do like about, music and art and stuff in general. And that has to do with the strong emotions and the sense of drama. But there's a sense of romance, and not a sense in that everything would be seen through rose-tinted glasses or whatever. It's not as simple as that, but the pain and the love of letting go and knowing when to let go, and those themes are, I think, incredibly moving. I'm a simpleton when it comes to that, so it's easy to know how to tug on my heartstrings.
What was the soundtrack to your first heartbreak?
Oh man,
Or just
well,
a
I think
vivid one?
the romantic yearning
Yeah.
of a heartbreak of a relationship that never happened. It was Lemonheads and it was Suede. I remember Suede's first album came out, and that it hit me hard. It was was trying to find my way and I always loved artists that are fluid.
So I mean, you and Peter Steele obviously share a vocal expression. What do you think he did
Yeah.
that no one else can touch?
Well, going back to the individuality and the identity, he never lost. He was he was hard to understand, that person.
Yeah.
I had the chance of meeting him very briefly twice, but just like shaking hands, I was a fanboy, sweating. All my pores were sweating out, and it was a big deal for me. But I think that he was one with his music, and that's a thing we can all aspire to. He was, the music. Yeah, but he was charismatic.
Do you ever feel like it's, the heartagram and stuff? Do you ever feel like it has some sort of psychic power? Does it ever feel like that to you? Like it has a radiant heat?
I can't see. I'm too close to it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's that's my baby.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't really see forest of that, from these particular trees. So I'm blinded.
What does it mean to you
Which
now?
the symbol.
Yeah.
Well, what does it mean? That's such a everything in a way, because I think that talking about emotional states that you can't put into words, and me picking up a guitar to try to explain to myself melodically what I'm feeling is a similar. You can, when one can do that with a symbol, is quite strong as well, because the heartagram does, it has its history, and because of that history, it has I have certain emotional attachment to it, but it's also just as a symbol. It is what I am trying to give as many mixed messages as possible. It's a very uncertain symbol. It doesn't know where it stands, and being so proudly uncertain, it has strength. Because I think I don't know where I belong and if I belong, and I'm not sure if I ever will. But and the symbol represents all that very well. It has that the symbolic, the sort of like magical things, but then the Valentine card sort of satanic panic 80s Twisted Sister sort of vibe. So it has all those layers. It's a in a symbol form. It's like Blade Runner, the movie, combining many different genres and tongue-in-cheek moments and heartfelt moments and everything between. And it's never dated.
Is life more romantic and dramatic after him, or is it less? Or is
how interesting. It's less messy.
it's less messy?
Yeah, I think. But I'm still very close to him as a band,
Yeah.
and it was such a long trip that I hope it never leaves me. You know,
Yeah.
it's it'll be a part of me, so I can't separate these two. But yeah, there's, I wouldn't call it optimism, but there's a sense of hope. Um, there's a there's a my despair is sprinkled with a tad of hope on top, like with a hope icing on this particular despair cake.
When do you think was the darkest time in your life to date?
There's been quite a
This is
few.
a nice, light-hearted question.
It is indeed. I think that there's been quite a few, and I think that applies to most of us. You know, it's due to, at times it's internal, at times it's external. Just you know, stuff just goes wrong, and it's tough to handle it. I had a hard time when I was drinking way too much. My relationships were going really badly, and I was working on music at the same time, recording and releasing stuff. That was around Venus Doom, the album, with him around 2006 or so. That was you know, the chaos was self-administered. You know, it's I'm the only one to blame. But when you're a bit younger, it's tough to say. You know,
that's enough.
It's like it's more about maybe trying to reach that something that I imagined Bukowski might have touched. You know, all the fantastical Bohemian French Baudelaire or whatnot, that sort of romantic, you know, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. You know, that
I know what you mean.
Sort of, letting go of yourself and letting go of this world for a wee bit and just not giving two fucks. I think there's something beautiful about that too. It's just it's a thing that doesn't last. At least in my case, it's like the honeymoon period is over really quickly, and yeah, I should have written a prenup. And I think that it was very important because if I wouldn't have, if you don't OD, this is symbolic. If you don't OD, you don't know your limits. You know, when it comes to whatever in life. So I'm glad that I did go overboard in many a sense.
Yeah,
I think during the pandemic there was a moment. I think that's a good example. The whole pandemic was a good example of a sort of collective unconscious, because you could really feel it. You know, you could really see it, and you could really, wherever you were, there was this sense of this dark cloud wasn't an individual dark cloud on everybody's heads. You know, it was a big dark cloud on every all of our heads that didn't have anything to do who we are as people. You know, where we come from politically or religiously or whatever. You know, that didn't really matter. It was and I think that was quite endearingly beautiful. The uncertainty of the whole humankind, not really knowing what's going to happen next. I remember the same feeling when during the mid '80s, when another brain fart. How can I? Chernobyl happened in Russia.
What if it was the apocalypse, what would be your last meal, and what would be the record that you would play in the background?
I'd eat whatever my girlfriend would like to eat, and I'd listen to whatever she'd like to listen.
That's romance. That's true romance. What's the Neon Noir experience? What's the Neon Noir live experience? How is it different and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's hard for me to compare it to anything, or you know, it's it is a wee bit different. We have two guitar players instead of one guitar player and a keyboard player, and there's I did a ton of backing tracks because there was a lot of stuff that can't really be played live, and I wanted to have the big backing vocal, the choir sort of stuff going on live as well. And you can't just make it happen with a couple of guys doing it. So I ended up recording like I did the album. I recorded all the keyboards, all the backing vocals, all the percussion for all the hymn songs as well. So that brings the hymn songs a bit closer to the new ones, and it creates this sort of continuous flow in between that stuff. So that's something new music-wise. And because we're doing that, we can do things we couldn't do with him, like program the lights to be in sync with the music, which sounds simple, but well, a lot of bands have been doing that forever, but we never did with him because we were always very analog. We were kind of old school when it comes to that, and we used to click track the drummer usually, but we never had computers on stage or anything like that. So that's quite exciting because it makes it sound a bit more like a record, and it makes it sound maybe a bit more modern because of it. It's not so haphazardly Iggy Pop and the Stooges, because a live experience is usually a bit more rough around the edges, and that's something that you want. But this time around, I want it to be sound epic, for lack of a better word. So it has, and we have this really cool. Hopefully, we're able to travel with it all around the world. This really cool. I call it the V-gram, the new version of the heartagram with those two lines, creating my initials. We have this big LED. It's like 2.5 meter by 2.5 meter thing, like a KISS logo thing that they had in the second. I always loved that. I always wanted to have something like that, and we're finally able to do it. It's an LED thing, and it looks great. There's clips on YouTube you can go and see. We played a few shows in Helsinki not too many weeks ago, so there's some material. So it's tough for me to, I'm partial. I think it looks great, and I think it looks like the music, and I think that's the important thing. It looks like Neon Noir. It looks like a combination of 80s neon colors coming together with the sort of Baudelarian sense of despair,
That sounds pretty immersive, like as a live experience. Like people will be immersed.
It is for me.
Yeah.
And also the fact how we zigzag in between the new songs and the old songs. So it's not like we'd have a mini set in the end that we play 5 hymn songs. It's every other song. So it creates this cool time travel sort of feel for myself personally, and it's nostalgic in a very beautiful way, and it creates these cool musical and emotional relationships between the new tracks and the old ones, and which for me it's interesting because there's so many similarities rather than dissimilarities.
It's you. You can't really.
Yeah.
It's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zebra and stripes and all that. So it's there's a lot of stuff that is very emotional to me as well because of the disbanding of him, and there's been a new chapter or whatever you want to call it. It's I think it's very it doesn't, because it's the first time I've done this. It's a first, and it's cool to be sort of an old dog in the business, but still have that sense of, what am I doing here? It's the first time. I haven't done this before. I don't have a clue, and that balancing act is quite cool to me. I think the fact that there's a lot of mistakes, and a lot of mistakes I gladly admit to, but a lot of things done right as well. The band is great. They're really good musicians, and they're different from him as well. I was hoping for musicians that would appreciate the sort of like sonic aesthetic of, let's say, Queens of the Stone Age a bit more than, let's say, Type O Negative, for example. So it's a bit more artsy than metal. And I think that Neon Noir as an album as well is more, I think it's in an old school way of interpreting it, the genre of it. I would say that it's an alternative album, as opposed to a metal album. I'm being very giddy about it all.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Maybe it's also because for the last few years of the band, we weren't sure if we want to be together as a band. So it felt a bit of a drag at times. Not playing was always great, but the everything else, trying to figure out if we have a future or not. And maybe not having that past dragging me down with this, it enables me to feel there's a bit more levity in the proceedings. But I think as a band, we needed a bit we needed a kick in the butt, you know. At that time, we needed something to be excited about, and we'd done the Screamworks, the album, and we'd done Tears on Tape, and neither of the albums really worked that well. You know, we loved them as a band when we were working on that stuff, but they didn't really. At times, you know, music just doesn't resonate. It is, you know, it just, I don't know what it is, but it didn't work out, and I think that I started to feel as a songwriter and the Head Honcho, I started to feel a bit, is this it? You know, where, you know, I think it's very normal, you know, whenever you're in whatever work relationship or something, you know,
any relationship.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it just starts to feel like a bit of a drag, and then we tried to revive the operation by getting a new drummer. Cosmo is his name, and he was great. And then we did a couple of more tours, and that was it. We started working on new stuff, but it didn't sound good. I think that, you know, we sort of didn't lose the will to live, but sort of, you know, the spark was gone. You know, it didn't feel cool to go to the rehearsal place. It felt like a drag. It was like, wait, you know, a lot of people know the feeling when you're going to something you really don't want to go, if you know, and that's always a bad sign, especially when it comes to art. So we tried our best, and we tried to make it work, and in that sense we can't blame, because we didn't leave any stones unturned. So we tried to make it work, and it didn't. And then I think one of the better things we ever did as a band was to call it a day at a good time.
Oh, totally.
You know?
It's a beautiful thing that a band knows when to, you know, when it's yeah. Well, you know, it'd be cool to come back, but I'm excited to see this. Yeah. This is still you. This is still him songs. This is new songs. This is a whole new musical world, and you're excited about it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it is, you know, it is a thing that you can appreciate a life-changing relationship that you've been in, but it doesn't mean that you want to, you know, you want to re-participate. You know, it's like it's a great memory. It's a great thing, but you know, but I don't know. You know, but it's some people have been talking about reunions or whatever. I never say never. You know, they're great fellas and all that, but it's just, it feels like going backwards. You know, and it's not a good move. You know,
no,
to me personally, and to my, you know, my emotional well-being.
Well, right now it's interesting to see what happens next with this new project, like, and experiments and you know, exploration, and where will this go? And yeah,
you know, it's the great Finnish experiment.
Yeah,
that's what it is. But
awesome. Thank you for the deep dive. It's always interesting. I love art brains. They're interesting to have a
pleasure
wonder.
indeed. Thanks for the chat.